get shocked by some of the visuals you just saw there, but that is exactly my intention. I want you to be wounded, and I want you never to forget this. So we are here actually on stage 3 Bengalis. Kanchanda has a story to tell as a refugee. So Deep Halder also has memories of being uprooted. I was very lucky. My grandparents came over to the today's West Bengal side before partition. So to begin today's session, I would like the personal stories of Kanchanda as well as Deep, and tell us how you are connected to East Bengal and East Pakistan.
Thank you, Alo, for having me over here, and thank you everybody for coming so early in the day. I mean, Sunday 9:30 is like.
This is Pondicherry.
I didn't even get time to do my hair.
You're looking very good.
You know, it's as Alo said, it's very important that, unless we have memories, we will tend to go down the same path again and again and again. My grandparents, they came to India, my maternal grandparents and my paternal grandmother. They came to India after partition. They held on with the hope that all this violence is going to subside, and they would not have to leave their homeland. We had a fragmented notion of Desh, and Desh meant your village, your district, your immediate surroundings. And she was a widow. She was widowed quite early in her life, and she had 5 children. My father was, I think, all of 11 years old or 12 years old, and the youngest child was still a toddler. The way it happened is that they had to literally come to India with the clothes on their, which they were wearing at that time. They couldn't bring anything. You didn't keep money at home, but so you didn't have money in hand. You had a lot of gold jewelry, but you were scared that because of the jewelry you would be waylaid and killed, so you just left the jewelry with your neighbor, trusting that the neighbor will look after them, and that you would come back one day and either get back to where you were, or you would take this back from your neighbor. But that is not how the story unfolded. If you do just a preliminary survey of refugees from the East, now why am I drawing a distinction? There has been a lot of literature on partition in the West, that's in Punjab. You have books, you have research papers, you have documents, government documents, which are still extant, and you have an exact idea of what happened, how many came, where were they settled, where did they move after coming in. But there is no such documentation, or let's put it this way, there is very scant and little documentation of partition in the East. The other difference is that in Punjab there was partition violence. That is violence immediately before 1947, 15th August 1947, and immediately transfer of population. The bulk of the Sikh population, the Jat Sikh population, they migrated to India, and those who stayed back were essentially what we now call Dalits, Dalit Hindus. And they were restrained because the uh, uh, Punjabis didn't know Punjabi, the Muslim Punjabi, the Punjabi, they were acutely conscious that they needed people to clean their toilets. And that's why they were restrained and they were not allowed to leave. And something similar occurred in the East. Partition in the East is what we call a continuing partition. It begins in 1946 with Jinnah's call for direct action over the cabinet mission plan, and his declaration that we will either have a divided India or a destroyed India. So he settled for the second option in August 1946. And direct action day was 16th August 1946 in Alo. The reason we need memory is that we can then connect why Mamata Banerjee chooses August 16 as her Khana holiday, and she is clearly pandering to the remnants of the Muslim League. The violence in Calcutta was unprecedented. Although there had been communal violence in Kolkata, especially in the industrial areas, the port area in the past, but nothing on this scale. And the documentation again of the direct action violence is very scant. The government at that time was the Muslim League government in Calcutta, in Bengal, and Surawati, who was the chief minister, he was supporting direct action. It was only later when there was an official inquiry, some data came out, and roughly it is believed that people were killed in less than 72 hours. Now, cutting the long story short, in the East, just immediately before August 1947, an violence. So it was not that people were leaving because of violence, but they were leaving because something worse than violence, and which is the fear of violence. And then, as we have seen, that in 1955-56, then again in 65, then subsequently 1971, it was a continuous process of cleansing East Pakistan and later first East Bengal, then East Pakistan, and then Bangladesh of its Hindu component. The Noakhali riots, which came in immediately after the direct action day riots, they also the whole thing of fear of violence, looming violence. Now, what did the refugee do when he came into Bengal, West Bengal? The refugee had very little choice. There was no government support for the refugee, unlike for the refugee in the West. There was an official system which forced refugees out of Bengal. It's not as if the refugees were welcome in Bengal or in India at that point of time. And Jawaharlal Nehru, who was the Prime Minister, he kept writing letter after letter to B.C. Roy saying that shut the border, don't let them come in, send them back, push them back, they are coming here for free food. What was the free food? Some of the refugees got rotten rice for the first couple of weeks. It was not even a proper system of food ration. And the next stop was that they would be picked up, put into trucks, and sent off to places like Dandanya, which is now in Chhattisgarh. And it was a total alien landscape. It was dry, parched land, mosquito infested, disease infested, and they were just dumped over there. That now you live your lives. Later, some of these refugees who were dumped in Dandanya, they had this craving to get back to Bengal, and yet they understood that there was little available in Bengal for them, and they said that they have the agreement of the communists, that when the communists come to power, they can. There was the Morinchapi massacre, which you may have heard of. The others, they were sent off to Andaman, and if you go to Andaman, you will still have a large community of East Bengal refugees living there. So basically it was a story of deprivation, it was a story of dehumanization, and it was a story of degradation. My grandmother, she would wake up at 3:30 in the morning, go to the community hand pump. She would bathe, wash her clothes, and then carry buckets of water to the house, because she felt that it was her prestige was at stake if people saw her or her children using the public hand pump. And since then, she would eat the last in the house, and she would wait, because those were also the years of great hunger, great, uh, there was a lot of starvation around, there was the food shortage period, and women would come would move from house to house, and they knew that nobody had food to offer. But I don't know what you call rice water over here, the water which, no, not the fan, when you boil the rice, the water. So everybody who
So on the counter there, called Blood Island. So these also, if you, it's a beautiful, it's a very well written book. It's an oral history of the Morinchapi massacre. Now, what the Morinchapi massacre and talking about his book will do is to tell you about the pogroms targeted towards the Hindu community from 1947 till 1970. That is the East. The alleged hair of the prophet is stolen or lost in Kashmir, and the Hindus of Bengal had to bear the brunt of the massacre. That is the Hazrat Bal pogrom that you see on the display out there. So Deep, now let us talk about your book, Morinchapi massacre. How did you connect with it, and what is it that you try to tell through that account?
Well, I didn't know that I suffer from something called generational trauma till very recently, till I started writing my books. I think the UPA 2 had just begun, and I was approached by HarperCollins to write a book, and I didn't know what to write on. So they said that you just write, because I think they were looking for new writers in non-fiction. And I remember this story I had heard in patches, in my childhood and also growing up. It is the story of Morinchapi. It's also the the first story, in fact, that I remember, because it came to me through the survival of Morichapi. So the Morichapi massacre took place in 1978, 79. It was exactly a year after the left-front government came to power in West Bengal. So as Kanchan was saying, some of the Bengali Dalits who came over from East Pakistan and also Bangladesh, but mostly from East Pakistan at that time, to West Bengal, and since West Bengal could not accommodate them, they were sent to Dandakaranya, where space they did not like at all because it was arid, the language was foreign to them. They were mostly fisher folk, they were farmers, they wanted to do cultivation, they wanted to catch fish, sell them, that was their traditional professions. So they wanted to find a spot in the Sundarbans area of West Bengal. Sundarbans, remember, is also in, large chunk of Sundarbans is also in what is Bangladesh. So they thought that, okay, this is a space where there are a lot of tiny islands where we can accommodate ourselves and where we can cultivate land and engage ourselves in fishing. And one of the reasons they thought that they could do this was because the communists who were in opposition at that time, they told them when they were being sent back almost a decade ago to Dandakaranya that look, this is a very bad thing that is being done to you by both the center and the state. If we are in power, if we come to power, we will make sure that we'll bring you back to West Bengal because you are Bengalis. This is where you belong. Now they lived with that hope, okay, all these years while they tried to somehow carry on with their lives in Dandakaranya, that someday the communists would come to power and they will bring us back to West Bengal. Now the communists did come to power in 1977, but they forgot all about that promise because it didn't matter anymore, I think, politically. They sent delegations to meet the Chief Minister Jyoti Basu at that time. They met other communist leaders, but there was no movement. There was no attempt at bringing them back to Bengal from Dandakaranya. So over the course of their time in Dandakaranya, whatever little money they had saved, they took that and they identified a place in the Sundarbans called Morichapi Island. It's a tiny island and uninhabited at that time and also now. And they decided to go there by themselves without any help from the government and set up a township, which they did. This was 1978. So the better part of 1978, this amazing experiment took place in the tiny little island called Morichapi. There were hordes of refugees. At one point of time, I think the number swelled to around 1 lakh or more. They cleared shrubs. It was a completely uninhabited island. They cleared shrubs, built huts, and there was a boat manufacturing yard. There was a salt pan factory. There was a school there. They later set up a tube well. So it was a bustling township. Sometimes in the story, when I recall the story of Morichapi, I tend to forget the experiment that took place there, where out of nothing, some writers, thinkers, political activists who they leaned on, but they mostly did it on their own. Now my father was a young professor at that time, used to be one of the people who used to go there, and he got to know some of the refugee leaders in that island. So later on, when the massacre of Morichapi happened, last months of 1978 and the first few months of 1979, the daughter of the top leader of Morichapi came to stay with us. Now I was 5 years old at that time. I had no idea about all of this. Her name was Mana. She was named after Mana camp because that's where she was born. She was around 15 at that time. So Mana, and I was 5-6 years old. So Mana was introduced to me as an elder cousin, but she looked a little different. She spoke differently. Her accent was different. So I didn't quite believe that story, but we became friends, and she would tell me in the night stories that I couldn't make sense of. stories of huts being set on fire, policemen coming in the middle of the night taking women away, hordes of policemen suddenly coming into a village and attacking villagers, about gunfights and about villagers trying to fight the policemen with bows and arrows and spears made with from branches of trees. Now these were fantastical stories for me. Imagine for a 5-year-old hearing such stories. But that memory stayed with me. So later on, when I was asked by HarperCollins to write a book, somehow I thought the first book that I should write is the first story I ever heard. So that's how it began. I went to my father who simply refused to help me. He said, "It's not your story to tell because you don't know anything about it." But then I said, "Look, I want to tell the story. Please trust me with the story." And he gave me a few numbers, and it took me Alo 5. Journalism teaches you to write fast. Sort of whatever it's history in a hurry. But it took me all of 5 years to write this book, and Kanchanda was a huge help when the book came out, because I seriously thought when it came out, maybe 10 people will read the book, but whatever little success Blood Island has had is thanks to this gentleman to my left. But the story took me to very dark spaces. The story took me to how the left betrayed Bengali Hindu refugees, mostly Dalits. The story, even after staying with it for so long, I still cannot make sense of why the communists did what they did to unarmed refugees in a tiny island in the Sundarbans. Why was there the need for mass rapes, for setting almost 6,000 huts on fire, for killing people in a systematic manner, for torturing, for letting them literally starve in an island because they were cut off from the neighboring islands by a cordon of police launches. I still don't get the reason for this. I have interviewed in the book a gentleman who now is a TMC MLA and a very known writer, Dalit writer, Monoranjan Bapari. He has described Buddhadev Bhattacharya in the choicest of words. And he told me and some of the other sort of bureaucrats at that time, now retired, they said that, look, it's just the ego of one man, Mr. Jyoti Basu, who could not take the fact that, when he said no to Dalit Hindu refugees coming into West Bengal, setting up township in a village, and they defied him and dared to do so, he could not take it. There are of course other reasons. But in 78, 79, I think, so when the book came out, I think the print, which I'm associated with now, called it the biggest massacre in post-independent India. It's bigger than 84, 2002. I didn't say it, it's their headline, but simply in terms of the number of people killed, the numbers go up to 6,000, 7,000. There's no record, of course. If you look up Morichapi massacre on Wikipedia, you will see that the government of the day, the left-hand government, said that 7 or 8 people were killed, which includes 2 policemen, and the number runs into thousands. So this kind of apathy towards your own by an elected government, the first elected government, communist government, is unbelievable, and people don't talk about it. People don't, people still sort of deny that something of this magnitude took place. It's simply amazing.